Alrighty, time for the Expedition League Balance Manifesto. I'm just going to read through all this. I haven't looked at any of it yet. Give whatever thoughts I have as I'm reading through everything. There's a lot going to be going on in this one. Okay, with every league release, we review and rebalance many aspects of Path of Exile to update and reinvigorate old mechanics while trimming some power from strategies that stand too far above the rest. This time around, our changes are far more thorough. As part of the Expedition League announcement, Chris has already talked about a number of changes, but we'll go over them again quickly here with a bit more of a discussion of their consequences and some associated changes we've made as a result. Over time, the introduction of new mechanics, updates to existing balance, and improved collective understanding of the game has caused the damage of characters to be way too high. Many players are able to complete mid-difficulty boss fights in a fraction of a second without any interesting interaction. Our ability to create interesting boss fights and monster combat is removed when players are routinely killing these monsters before the bosses before they have used a single ability. Because of this, we're significantly reducing player damage at higher levels to greatly increase the challenge of in-game content, and are raising monster life at lower levels to make the leveling experience in line with our vision of how Path of Exile should be. Many of these changes are intended to affect every character in the game in some way, but we're still going to continue our tradition of making changes to the most powerful and least powerful mechanics to improve build diversity. Information already provided in the announcement livestream have been reproduced in italics. Okay. The Great Support Gym Reduction. Relevant section from the livestream. For a while now, we have been concerned with the power gap between support gyms. There are gyms that grant huge multiplicative damage bonuses, and there are gyms that do a bunch of stuff you don't really care about. When you're building a character, by far the correct choice is to stack all the multiplicative damage bonuses and ignore all the interesting utility support gyms because their opportunity cost is just too high. We are reducing the damage bonuses on the support gyms that are clearly just all about huge damage boosts and trying to give them impactful and appropriate downsides. For example, the Controlled Destruction support gym now penalizes critical strikes multiplicatively. Overall, this works out to be a total of somewhere around 20%, potentially as high as 40% damage reduction for a character using a fully 6-linked skill with entirely damaged support gems. There's much less impact for characters that used utility support gems or who didn't have a 6-link setup. Much less impact for characters who didn't have a 6-link setup. So if you have a 5-link, it's not going to affect you as much, but you have a 6-link, you're going to be doing 20 to 40% less damage. I don't understand how that's going to work. Like the support gems are going to filter through, but we'll see. This achieves two goals for us. Firstly, the gap between the good and bad support gems has been narrowed, creating more interesting build opportunities. Secondly, player damage output in the endgame is reduced, which is a goal for this balance pass. As I mentioned, we want to iteratively restore challenge to Path of Exile. It's worth clarifying that we haven't buffed unused utility support gems as part of this balance pass. It's fully intentional that it's a reduction of power for the most damaging ones. Damage multipliers between support gems have been standardized following these rules. Gems that provided a useful benefit in addition to damage usually grant less than 25% more damage at gem level 20. Okay. Those that provide only a damage bonus or have a very mild restriction or penalty grant around 30 to 35% more damage. Those with downsides or restrictions grant between 38 and 48% more damage depending on how severe the cost of using the support is. A couple of existing supports had a downside added, allowing us to keep the damage multiplier relatively high. As an example, melee physical damage now grants support skills 10% less attack speed. Interesting. Certain builds, such as Earthquake Bleed, are barely affected by this downside, because the damage multiplier hasn't changed. Support is almost as strong as before. Minion damage causes minions from supported skills to have 25% less life. So you might want to consider other supports if your minions scaled damage from their life, or if they're not tough enough when supported. Okay. Interesting. This change provides more choice for builds that can be supported by a variety of support gems and lessens the relative damage loss incurred by using a support gem that doesn't provide direct damage, like Chain or Ancestral Call. Okay. There are now builds that will benefit more by using far more interesting support gem setups that were previously balanced around using only high damage support gems. A number of projectile and bow support gems like Barrage, Greater Multiple Projectiles, and Chain haven't been changed. So builds using these more interesting projectile support effects will have lost much less damage than other builds. This has caused certain bow builds to be strong relative to other skill setups at late game. With our buffs to skills like Barrage, 15% damage increase at gym level 20, Lightning Arrow, 15% damage increase at gym level 20, Split Arrow, 10% more attack speed at all levels. These add up to really help bring bows up in power relative to other builds. Okay. Interesting. Split Arrow is pretty good. I'm giving it more attack speed at all levels. That's nice. Lightning Arrow has been in a sore spot for quite a while. And Barrage is like the only good single target on a bow build. That wasn't like Toxic Rain, Explosive Arrow, the stuff that's scaled differently. For like a hit damage bow build, it was pretty much like use Barrage or you're not getting as much damage as you could. Okay. Many trap support gems haven't been adjusted, so trap builds will not suffer much of a damage loss compared to using other skills at high levels. The trap support, cluster trap support, multiple trap support, charge trap support, advanced trap support, and swift assembly support are unchanged. This has caused traps to be stronger relative to other skill setups at late game, and they'll have more of a reason to use the special trap support gems instead of generic damage support gems. There are buffs to the cooldown trap skills. Lightning Spire Trap, 25% more damage at all levels. Okay, and Seismic Trap, 40% more damage at all levels and a drastic increase of area of effect. I mean, it's a step in the right direction for Seismic Trap, but I still do not see that skill being useful. I could be wrong, but like, I've tried to use it. We'll see what happens there. Lightning Spire Trap, getting buffed back into things is going to be significant for speed leveling, for sure. That's why it got nerfed, and by it getting its damage back, it will see a use in leveling. We have made their wave and strike frequency now scale with trap throwing speed instead of cast speed. Okay. Yes, this does mean with the Architect's Hand or Slave Driver's Hand unique items, you get immense bonuses even if you're not a trapper. You can see how trap builds are going to be very powerful. Very cool. Very cool. Very, very cool. Traps have been kind of just under the radar, not quite as good as they could be for quite a bit, so that's interesting. Certain builds that were balanced around having very powerful support gems have lost more damage than others as a result of these changes. To counteract this, a broad section of skills have received a notable boost in damage at high levels. This won't bring their 6-link damage back to where it was before the reduction to support gem power. It just makes sure that they're not punished more than other ones by the changes. This predominantly affects skills that use melee weapons, but there are others affected too. In general, skills that use melee weapons have had a 25% damage increase at gym level 20 and are unchanged at gym level 1. Here's an example of a melee attack that adds damage increased at gym level 20. So, ground slam. So I guess the attack damage has been this multiplier, and the effectiveness of added damage has been increased. It's not adding any flat damage, so I guess it's all in the effectiveness of added damage. Okay. This has the nice side effect of making gym level for these attack skills matter more. That's cool. And the potential for a 4-linked secondary melee skill like Ancestral Warchief to have barely lost damage. Ancestral Warchief, supported by melee physical damage support, Pulverize support, and Multi-Strike, which now applies to totems. That is awesome. This is so cool. Multi-Strike applying to totems is awesome. So, has only lost 2.5% of damage after the buff. That's really cool. I'm very excited about this. Multi-Strike now applies to totems. Cool. At the same time, we realized that slams have been overperforming relative to other melee builds for a while. As a result, we've changed Seismic Cry to no longer provide more damage to exerted attacks. Warcry empowered slams were incredibly powerful, as slams received a damage boost from Seismic Cry that non-slam melee skills didn't have access to, 100%. Okay. So, forms of Warcry, taunting nearby enemies to attack the user and exerting subsequent slam attacks. Okay, so this used to say, I think exerted attacks have 30% increased AoE, and exerted attacks have 30% more damage per previous attack exerted by this Warcry. Now, it is 30% increased AoE per previous attack exerted by this Warcry. So, big change here. Lining this up with the Intimidating Cry is how things were just, like, getting way out of hand. So you could get 5 charges on this, so you could have 120% more damage before. Now you're going to get 120% increased AoE. So I like this change. I think this was needed. 200% increased knockback distance. Cool. This brings slams more in line with other skills when enhanced by Warcries, though they still have the advantage of some slow slam specific mechanics like the Fist of War support gem. The support gem changes affect 6 link skills far more than they do with fewer links, because of how each support gem compounds with each other. So the damage loss won't be felt much in the early and mid game, as support gems were generally nerfed far less or not at all at gem level 1. There will be cases during the campaign where buffed skills will have more damage than before, especially for players that struggle to find or craft 5 or 6 linked items early in the league. We've numerically buffed the increased critical strike support, increased critical damage support, and the Nightblade support, as they were seeing relatively little use for builds that were invested in critical strikes, making sure their effect is more in line with other support gems or a build invested in criticals. I think at level 20 this was something like 90 crit multi, so this is like a big increase in crit multi for this gem. Very cool. Yeah. At the top end of character progression, we found that Awakened support gems provided too significant of a damage increase over the regular support gems. If you had 5 Awakened support gems, your 6-link damage could be as high as 50% more damage compared to having regular support gems. Very true. The quality of Awakened support gems is now the same as on the base support gem. In some cases, such as Awakened Generosity's level of supported Aura skill gems, we've added the quality stat as a reward for leveling the gem to 5 instead. Quality of Awakened support gems. Now, okay. In some cases, such as Awakened Generosity's level of supported Aura skill gems, we've added the quality stat as a reward for leveling the gem to 5 instead. That doesn't make sense to me, but I've also never used Awakened Generosity, so yeah, I'd have to see that to understand it. We have also taken the opportunity to make mana multipliers on support gems more consistent in general. Mana multipliers have gone up slightly, but several gems have had mana multipliers lowered as a result of this pass. Archmage had its damage based on the mana cost of supported skills lowered. 60% of mana cost from 108% at level 20. Ooh. Okay. I mean, I guess that's kind of fair. It gave so much flat damage. It really did. Okay. It now also sets your spell's mana cost to be 5% of your maximum unreserved mana instead of 6%. Okay. That's a big change, too. As support gem mana multipliers were generally increased across the board. Okay, so this can get back. This will be a significant reduction in damage as mana builds using Archmage were very strong both offensively and defensively. Okay, so this 5% used to be 6%. We've changed the quality bonuses for a variety of support gems that didn't make a lot of sense for the base gem. For those, we focused on those that provide speed. For example, greater multiple projectiles now give us projectile damage instead of attack and cast speed. Darn! I liked this. I like the attack and cast speed quality on it. I thought it was really cool. Chain now gives increased chaining range instead of projectile speed. This is great. This will make Exsanguinate better, with projectile speed becoming its anomalous quality instead at a lower value. Yeah, cool. I'm a fan of that. Faster projectiles now grants a further increase to projectile speed instead of attack and cast speed, with the divergent quality becoming increased damage instead. There are lots of individual changes that have been made to support gems that will be revealed in the patch notes tomorrow. Alrighty. That's going to be interesting. We're going to have to see in the patch notes how exactly that's going to break down, but we'll move on to the Flask rework. And change the music up. Alright, Flask system rework. For quite some time, Path of Exile players and developers have been keen for a big rework to its Flask system. I haven't really. I've enjoyed the Flasks, but that's me. In the in-game, Flasks grant really powerful buffs for a number of seconds after use, and these buffs allow the player to kill monsters quickly, filling the flasks up so they can be used as soon as they run out. With 5 such flasks equipped, the correct behavior was to spam the 1 through 5 keys repeatedly to keep all the flasks up consistently without any downsides. This flask piano playstyle was popular enough that players were improvising devices to hit all those keys at once. Spamming the same keys repeatedly to get a set of powerful buffs that rival the power you get from your entire set of equipped items is not a fun game mechanic. It's unbalanced and certainly isn't nice on your wrist, but is very unique in the action RPG genre. I will throw that out there. I've always thought that flasks were like one of the defining features of this game, so I'm really curious to see how this goes. It prevents us from balancing the game well for players who aren't smashing their keyboard constantly, and it seriously restricts the design space we can use on flasks. In addition, certain unique flasks completely outclass other ones in terms of raw damage output. It was pretty clear to us that Path of Exile would be a lot better if we did some serious work on flasks to make sure their incentives were aligned with fun rather than spamming blindly. Most utility flasks and unique flasks have been rebalanced. Expect a lot less permanent power from flasks. Flasks that provide raw defense or raw power are the ones with the biggest nerfs. Some flasks have been selectively buffed a bit if they were underpowered or less popular. In the Expedition expansion, there are now 3 ways that you can use flasks. You can continue to either use the rebalanced ones the traditional way, or you can apply one of 2 new types of currency items to your flask. The Instilling Orb and Enkindling Orb drop as part of the regular drop pool from regular monsters and chests. The Instilling Orb will cause a flask to be used automatically upon reaching a specific condition being met. For example, when its charges become full, or when you become affected by Ignite. This means that in cases where you would previously want to time a specific flask usage, you can now rely on it happening automatically, with the only trade-off being that it may consume charges that you otherwise wouldn't intended it to. There are a variety of different conditions, and a random one is enchanted onto your flask, overriding the others each time you use an Instilling Orb on it. Okay, the Enkindling Orb prevents utility flasks from gaining charges while active, but provides a big boost to their effect, duration, or various ways they interact with their charges. There are various different types of boosts, so you can use more orbs to reroll for the one you want. So this, if you can buff flask effect a lot, you could potentially, I guess, run 2 of the same utility flasks. So I don't know what the flask is going to be. We might see that below. But let's say the Quartz Flask that gave phasing and dodge chance. Let's say if you had 2 of those and you could Enkindling Orb and get a huge buff to it, you could cycle between the 2 flasks so that the other one's gaining, while gaining a lot more dodge from the flask, for example. All right, next. When a flask removes a curse, it no longer applies a period of immunity to curses. Flasks that remove ailments now only provide a period of immunity to the ailment if they actually removed it. So if you get ignited, use a dousing flask to remove the ignite and gain immunity for a while. You now can't just spam the flask before you're ignited to be permanently immune. If you want permanent mitigation of ailments, there are other options for your build. Note that we've rebalanced ailment mitigation in general so that there aren't a few options that completely outclass the rest. So this has me thinking there might be nerfs to ailment immunity builds, like what are they? Raider, maybe? Pathfinder, Inquisitor, they might not get. Hierophant has it as well with Arcane Surge. There might not be as reliable ailment immunity there. Monster density in Path of Exile gets a lot higher as you play through the game. When we initially balanced Flask charge generation a decade ago, we did not anticipate the levels of monster density we would reach by 2021. Monsters in Acts 6 through 10 now generate fewer Flask charges, and monsters in maps generate even fewer still. Okay. So now there's a lot more strategy involved with Flask use. Flasks don't gain as many charges, so they're a little harder to constantly spam and aren't designed to provide such a powerful slew of permanent buffs, but you can control which provide larger than normal effects and which are triggered automatically as part of your build. We've reworked existing flasks such as Basalt and Aquamarine flasks, and have introduced new Corundum and Gold flasks. They showed this off. The Basalt flask is now gives 20% more armor instead of 50% reduced physical damage taken, which this hurts a lot of dodge and evasion builds a lot. The flask rebalance has mostly affected utility flasks. Some have been reworked. The most notable change that hasn't been announced yet is to the Diamond Flask. It previously granted your critical strikes are lucky. This single effect provided a massive boost to your critical strike chance, more than any one source in the game. Because flasks no longer provide that much power, it has been changed to provide 100% increased critical strike chance instead, more in line with the power of other flasks. Note that this can now be affected by increases to Flask effect, and the ability to roll Surgeon's prefix on this flask type has been restored. Okay, that's good. With the changes to the Diamond Flask, we didn't want the Sulfur Flask to be the best critical strike flask, so enemies on consecrated ground no longer have additional base chance to be critically hit. I didn't know that was just a base effect of consecrated ground. I thought that was just a Bottled Faith thing. I guess Bottled Faith might have increased it, but we'll see. We've also improved some underused utility flasks, such as Ruby, Topaz, and Sapphire flasks, which now have a base duration of 5 seconds from 4 and consume 20 of 50 charges on use from 30 of 60. So they're able to be used more, and this has naturally improved the unique flasks that use these base types. Cool. Unique flasks have all been reviewed, and many of them have been rebalanced or reworked. In general, those that multiplied damage or provided massive defense have had this damage bonus reduced significantly. Certain unique flasks have instead received penalties to flask uptime instead of reducing their powerful stats. I bet we're looking at like roomies there. For example, Dying Sun still grants 15 to 25% increased area of effect and 2 additional projectiles, but now consumes more flask charges and has a lower duration. With an Enkindling Orb that provides flask effect, you can get 3 additional projectiles, and when combined with the Pathfinder Ascendancy or items and some passive skills, that can become 4 additional projectiles relatively easily. With an Enkindling Orb that provides duration, you can offset some of the uptime penalties on the flask. The introduction of Enkindling Orbs in combination with unique utility flasks has opened up some interesting new interactions. Coruscating Elixir is on the Ruby Flask base type, as mentioned above, had its base duration increased from 4 seconds to 5. When combined with the duration Enkindling Orb outcome, it now has a duration of over 15 seconds. Okay, so this is Chaos damage does not bypass ES during effect. Removes all but 1 life on use. Remove life is regenerated as ES over 2 seconds. Okay. Okay. Okay, we have also added 45% increased flask effect duration to the passive tree, lowering the amount given in by cluster jewel notables as a result. This combination of mechanics has implications with a certain unique belt, cough, soul thirst, cough. Replica Rumi's Concoction has a huge duration reduction, but with the duration in Kindling Orb effect, you can nullify this, providing massive defenses if you can cancel out the slowing effect while you have enough flask charges. Bella. We've also taken this opportunity to review Flask passive skills Flask effect is now mostly found around the ranger area of the tree, and some new passives have been added. Natural remedies. 25% increased flask effect duration. Flask applied to you have 10% increased effect and remove, maim, and hinder when you use a flask. See, this does like no good for like the ultimatum stuff where there's like hindering ground. Like it's gonna not affect anything to remove hinder. Okay. The Enduring Mana Flask no longer penalizes duration, so you have to press the button less, but it causes the flask to provide much less mana than before. Especially now that using a flask slot from a mana flask is a smaller loss of power. It has been rebalanced to provide a more appropriate level of mana recovery. The Adrenaline modifier on flasks now gives far less movement speed. 6 to 8% increased movement speed, down from 20 to 30. Putting more of a focus on enhancing a Quicksilver Flask's effect with associated costs, rather than rolling a single modifier that granted almost as much as the Quicksilver Flask itself. The Iron Skin and Reflexes suffixes have also been reduced, granting 40 to 60% increased armor evasion, down from 60 to 100%. Okay. Alrighty. It doesn't seem too bad. Like, I'm not as worried about the flasks. I'm worried about curses, because curses are just broken in this game. Especially when they're applied to player, and even being immune to curses, you can still get one shot by stuff. So that's the thing I'm mostly worried about here. Is I'm not as worried about the changes to Ignite and stuff. I'm worried about the fact that this game forces us to run 20%, or not 20%, corrupted maps in red maps. And it just like you can get slammed with curses, and you can be a build that was relying on Flask before for some kind of physical damage reduction. And that's been nerfed, as well as curse immunity. And so now you're going to go into those maps, be forced to be cursed with vulnerability, because you can't get rid of it permanently. I really hope they've accounted for this in some way, or like we're going to be going back to like the very old days where we're rolling any map that has temp chains on it because it's just painful. Like, I do not want that. And then everybody's going to just like every vulnerability map, you're going to die to bleed and get one shot to fizz damage if you're playing any kind of dodge or evasion build. That'll be what happens. That's the thing I'm most worried about, I think. Now let's see what we got with ailment mitigation. Flasks that remove ailments now only provide a period of immunity to that element if they actually removed it. So if you get ignited, use a dousing flask to remove the ignite and gain immunity for a while. You now just can't spam the flask before you're ignited to be permanently immune. If you want permanent mitigation of ailments, there are other options for your build. Note that we have rebalanced ailment mitigation in general, so there aren't a few options that completely outclass the rest. Okay. In addition to changes to how flask modifiers protect from ailments, we're also reworking how players mitigate ailments in other ways. The intent here is there shouldn't be a simple low investment option for any character to mitigate every single ailment. You should focus on mitigating the effects you're most threatened by, and just reducing the effects of those you can probably handle. For example, the change to Aquamarine Flask significantly reduce the effect of freeze. Will let you continue to act while frozen without mitigating it entirely. If you craft your Aquamarine Flask to maximize Flask effect, it can reduce a freeze to the point of it being mostly ignored. So if I'm reading this correctly, the Aquamarine Flask can turn freeze into a chill. Like there was a difference between chill and freeze. Freeze means you do not move. But according to this, like reducing the effect of freeze reduces the amount that it locks you in place. I guess. Okay. We've made a number of changes to mechanics that protect against all ailments at once. Most ascendancy skills that mitigated all ailments now provide partial or no mitigation. For example, the Raider now grants 50% chance to avoid ailments while phasing instead of the full ailment immunity while phasing. This is what I thought was going to happen. I thought it was going to be 50%, but that's fine. This change means Raiders don't trivialize elemental ailments from the get-go, but can still get full mitigation with a little bit investment elsewhere. The Hierophant and Pathfinder retain some level of elemental ailment mitigation, while the Inquisitor and Elementalist no longer have any at all. As we felt that the Ascendancy passives that provided elemental ailment mitigation alongside other properties were significantly powerful without it. Okay. Yikes. Big nerf to Inquisitor. I haven't played an Elementalist in years, so I don't know about that. Okay. Modifiers on gear that mitigate all ailments have also been reviewed and generally lowered in power, so it is much higher gear and passive skill investment to gain immunity to every ailment at once, making it more reasonable to focus on mitigating the specific ailments that are most problematic for your build. Okay. We want to provide new avenues for players to mitigate bleed, corrupted blood, and curses. Okay. Okay. Hopefully. I mean, we need reduced curse effect all over the path of tree. That's what I'm saying. Given how common bleed and curse removal flasks were. As a result, we have added extra support on the passive tree to mitigate bleeding, corrupted blood, and curses. It's okay. It's the thing I was most worried about. I'm just like, please. Okay. Through new stats, that's why I did not want to freak out about this until I had more clarification on what was going to happen. I was real nervous. All right. New stats and existing notables on a new passive cluster to do these. We've also made some minor changes to the Pantheon powers. The upgraded Soul of Ralakesh now grants you cannot gain corrupted blood while there are at least 5 corrupted blood stacks on you. And the upgraded Soul of Yugal now grants 20% reduced effective curses on you, replacing their previous bonuses. Okay. So you can't get up to like max stacks of corrupting blood with Soul of Ralakesh, but now there's an option between your flask charges, gain charges, and 20% reduced effective curses, because I'm probably going to be leaning towards that. Okay. Poison. Poison now deals 50% more damage. We didn't like that poison builds felt pigeonholed into playing assassin due to the extremely strong poison-related bonuses, and relied heavily on the Coralito's signature unique flask in the late game. we've reduced the power of Assassin's poison notable passives to be more in line with the kind of damage increases an Ascendancy usually gives. Noxus Strike no longer has plus 30% damage over Time Multiplier for poison, and the increased poison duration for each poison you have inflicted recently is now capped at 100%. Toxic Delivery now has poison you inflict with critical strikes deals 25% more damage from 50%. Interesting. Coralito's signature has been reworked to more directly benefit poison builds dealing critical strikes rather than any poison build. Okay. 30% damage over Time Multiplier for poison from critical strikes during Flask effects. Critical strikes do not deal extra damage, so... It doesn't grant the... Didn't it grant Perfect Agony before? Okay. The Pathfinder's Master Toxicist notable has received a smaller nerf, now causing poisons you inflict during any Flask effect to have a 20% chance to deal 100% more damage, up from 30%, while keeping its poison spread mechanic. Poisons you inflict during any Flask effect to have a 20% chance to deal 100% more damage, up from 30%. So it used to only 30% more damage, or... It should be down from 30% to 20%. Maybe. Because it does say a smaller nerf, and I'm reading this as a buff, so... The overall result is that poison builds should feel far better earlier on, and now allow for a wider selection of viable Ascendancy choices, such as the Occultist. Poison builds were also guilty of having particularly uninteresting array of support gems, with the most purely providing an unconditional more damage multiplier. True. We have reworked the poison support gem to now be called Critical Strike Affliction Support. This support gem provides damage over Time Multiplier to damaging ailments from critical strikes, so it can be used with ignites and bleeds too. The lesser poison support has been renamed Chance to Poison Support. Okay. Note this change affects all monsters as well. As in general, we felt poisons applied from monsters were unthreatening compared to other damaging ailments. However, we have lowered the poison damage of certain monsters that had significantly powerful poisons already, such as Alhesman, the Hunter. Such that the overall result is no damage buff compared to before. Yeah, because that poison is nasty. Ailment Thresholds. Now that player damage has been reduced, we've reviewed our ailment threshold calculations to compensate for the lower damage of fully supported skills. It's now much easier to apply stronger non-damaging ailments on enemies with less damage, especially on skills less heavily supported. We've also lowered the ailment threshold of particularly tough in-game encounters so that chill or shock investment is worthwhile on these encounters. Their threshold is now only slightly higher than regular map bosses. As a much requested quality of life change, players can now see the effect of non-damaging ailments on enemies and themselves, so that you can finally determine how powerful your shocks are on enemies and thus know what benefit they are giving you. Thank you so much. I thought that's what this was in the trailer or the announcement video. So this, in this screenshot right here, this boss is taking 11% increased damage from the shock. and players take 50% increased damage from the shock. Cool. As a much requested quality of life change, players can now... Yeah. This also applies to ailments applied to you and the buff granted you by the cruelty support. Cool. We also didn't know what that did. What do we got here? Two new looking skills. None of these flasks have any of the new enhancements to them. Okay. Trigger effect costs. When we're designing skills for Path of Exile, the mana cost of the skill is a mechanism to allow us to have large, impactful effects. Bigger skills should cost more mana to cast. Unfortunately, this entire mechanism is currently bypassed by triggering skills as this skips their mana cost. This basically means that we can't design really powerful spells. In 3.15, triggering skills through support gems will require paying their mana cost. In fact, sometimes now it costs more than casting the gem by hand. Thankfully, this isn't very hard with well-constructed characters. Certain support gems that were originally disabled from supporting triggered skills, like Arcane Surge, now can be used to support them. Cool. Builds that use triggered skills are some of the most interesting characters in Path of Exile, and are often the best representation of the craziness that our character customization system allows. We're confident that they are still just as powerful as before, but we now have more interesting design space to explore with future skills. As mentioned during the livestream, most triggered skills now cost mana. This was changed to add additional opportunity costs to trigger builds, as they already bypass various restrictions like cast time. Some triggers have higher cost than others, most notably cast on damage taken, which previously had no cost at all outside of taking up sockets. Some positive results of this change are that Archmage can now apply to triggered skills, and Reap now gains blood charges when triggered. Spells triggered with Mjolnir or Cast on Death don't require you to pay the costs. Well, I would hope Cast on Death didn't require you to pay a cost, because it requires a pretty significant cost. Alright, Flame Dash, and Smoke Mine. This one's got me a little scared. As you know, most interaction with monster behavior is essentially bypassed if you're using an extremely effective movement skill. This is okay if you have specialized deeply into customizing that skill, but it's currently the default state for any character if you use Flame Dash, Smoke Mine, or Dash without any further investment. These skills have been rebalanced to be more in line with other movement skills. These are not huge numeric nerfs, but do mean that there is a scope for improving the performance of these skills by specializing around them. Okay, many patches ago, we greatly buffed certain travel skills that were cooldown gated, most notably Flame Dash, Smoke Mine, and Dash. They provide a huge amount of mobility and travel speed with little opportunity costs, so we've lowered their values to be more appropriate for their investment. Smoke Mine has been most heavily affected. It now gives a 1-second burst of speed. Speed starts at 20% and scales up to 29%, so its speed growth isn't as extreme at no cost. Its smoke cloud size has been increased and now has a cooldown of 5 seconds rather than 2.5, and has no cooldown recovery as it levels. Chris mentioned in the live stream that the changes to these skills are not huge numerical nerfs. Smoke Mine is an exception. However, despite that, it is still very good at achieving the purpose of giving the player mobility and utility benefits. It is still very good for evading damage and traversing across areas. Dash's cooldown time is now 2.5 seconds from 2, and has a 0 to 90% increased cooldown recovery rate from 0 to 57%. Oof. That... don't like this. Let's see. We'll see. Flame Dash's cooldown time is now 3.5 seconds from 3 and has a 0 to 19% increased cooldown recovery rate from 0 to 47%. Its cast time is now 0.8 seconds from 0.7, but it still retains its cast time bypass if not used in rapid succession. So you're nerfing the base, and so like you could nerf the base and then the cooldown recovery rate. So this is hitting it on two different ends. So this is like you're lowering the cooldown time and then multiplicatively reducing the amount that it's scaled. Okay, the second Wind Support Gem has been changed to have a much higher mana multiplier and penalty rather than boost to cooldown recovery speed. There's now a choice rather than support gem you'd always use on a skill if you have a socket spare. It doesn't provide such a growth in uptime for the above skills. Level 1. Supported skills have a 24% reduced cooldown recovery rate. This is okay, so when they nerfed Archmage Stormbrand by nerfing brands, they nerfed Hierophant, they nerfed Brand Recall, like they hit it from every angle possible. They just did the same thing with the cooldown skills. So you nerfed the cooldown time, you nerfed how much it gains when leveling, and you nerfed the support gem that made it better. So like this says up here, Chris mentioned in the live stream that these changing skills are not huge numerical nerfs. These are huge numerical nerfs. Huge numerical nerfs. Like they are. Like this is a false statement. Because this is massive nerfs to these skills. I'm not happy about this change. Arcane Surge now provides increased mana regeneration rather than a percentage of mana per second. It no longer provides an increase to cast speed. This means it now provides slightly more mana recovery at lower levels before you've invested into mana regeneration, and works better with clarity but doesn't multiply with increases to mana regeneration at higher levels. I don't like that change either. I mean, I don't care about the mana. Like, the flat mana was cool, but increased mana regeneration is fine. But why take away the cast speed? The cast speed was awesome. Okay. Fortify is intended to be a natural benefit of playing a melee character, not primary defense to invest in. Over time, we've introduced larger values and more sources of Fortify effect to the point where it can almost completely mitigate damage from hits. We're aiming for having 40% less damage taken from hits with Fortify being the upper end of defensive power achievable with heavy investment. So you can't rely entirely on Fortify. Hence, all sources of Fortify effect have been reviewed, almost all significantly nerfed or replaced with something that is okay to be stacked. Okay. Damage over Time Multiplier. Reviewing sources of damage over time multiplier, this powerful damage bonus for damage over time skills has benefited disproportionately from cluster jewels, taking importance away from other sources. We've replaced all sources of the stat on non-notable cluster jewel passive skills with the standard damage increase to be consistent with other medium cluster jewels with damage bonuses, and lowered the values or replaced the stat entirely on cluster jewel notables. To put more importance on weapons, we've changed the large type-specific damage over time multiplier modifier in weapons to be a suffix rather than a prefix with no reduction in power. This makes it more in line with its intended equivalent critical strike multiplier. You'll now be able to obtain a better damage over time weapon than ever before. This is absolutely true. This is really cool. This is an okay. This is an absurd example to show, because this weapon is freaking impossible. Like, do you know, like, the weighting of +1 to all fire spells, plus, like, the weighting of all spells, let alone the weighting of 101% increased spell damage? What the heck? So, like, they're showing off, yes, it can... This is now a suffix, which is very cool. This is an interesting change. But, yeah. This is like a 40 Exalt weapon, though. Like, kind of insane. Like that might be lowballing it. 40 Exalts. Okay. A little bit of good news in there. My goodness. Veiled mods. After the rework to the Veiled item system in 3.14, we've reviewed how the Veiled Chaos Orb and Aisling crafts from Betrayal safe houses work, and have made some changes to making crafting less deterministic in the outcomes, as the unveiled modifiers can be very powerful additions to an item. Veiled modifiers no longer count as crafted modifiers, so you can't easily remove them if you add the wrong modifier while Aisling crafting. This has the advantage of now being able to block modifiers you do not want to unveil. By crafting a mod you don't want to unveil on the item prior to unveiling. By restricting the pool of mods you can unveil, you have a higher chance of unveiling the mod you want. Okay. Aisling's crafting bench that adds a veiled modifier now first removes a random modifier, so it is riskier to use as a later step of item crafting rather than being an obvious final step because of its very consistent modifier pool. I only got one of these crafts all league. All league. I only got Aisling to level 3 in research and then able to run the mastermind one time. All league. So it was a very rare thing that now has a very significant downsides to make it almost like not worth risking a very valuable weapon or piece of gear. I thought this should have. Veiled Chaos Orbs can no longer be used to get multiple veiled modifiers on an item. Previously, this was possible, taking advantage of metacrafting modifiers or fractured modifiers. Okay. So I guess it used to be able to... So if you fractured a veiled mod, then I guess... Okay. I haven't really used much of these, so... Dual attributes modifiers can no longer be rolled with other modifiers that grant flat amounts of attributes of the same types. The exception being those that grant all attributes. We didn't like the veiled modifiers, felt mandatory to get the highest amount of flat attributes of a specific type on an item. Okay. Ooh. Alright, other changes. There are hosts of other smaller changes which you'll be able to read about in the patch notes. Here are a few specific ones that justify a brief explanation. Focus's cooldown no longer expires while it's active, as players were able to keep focus effects up almost permanently, which provide a huge amount of powerful benefits. You can invest in keeping it up more, but you won't be able to keep it up permanently. This is especially important now as one of the few sources, as it's now one of the few sources of your critical strike chances lucky from a specific focus modifier. I thought that was a pretty unique thing that you could really invest to with the veiled mods and focus. Like, you had to build into being able to keep the focus stuff up. So, like, you're giving other things up by investing into it. But I've never really done that, so... It's also one of the only sources of, like, stupid amount of increased Fortify effect, so... I'm fine with that. Golem Elementalist no longer provides increased damage per golem. The Golem buff effect bonus on Liege of the Primordial now always provides 100% increased effect of buffs granted by your golems rather than scaling with golem count. This ascendancy path was providing too much power and defense compared to other high investment ascendancy effects, so is now more heavily focused on the buffs granted by golems rather than generic effects. By changing the buff effect on Liege of the Primordial, it creates less of a reliance on having many golems and makes it more powerful in cases where players want to use just a few instead of feeling forced to invest into maximum golems through various uniques. Okay. I've never really played with this, but I think the scaling around the golem buff effects is a cool thing. I don't know. The Raider's Ascendancy node, Rapid Assault, no longer provides Onslaught effect. The Onslaught path was too easily a choice relative to a high investment Frenzy Charge branch. We also replaced the movement speed on the small phasing passives with elemental damage, as there was already plenty of speed available on that Ascendancy. Okay, so another slight nerf to Raider. I don't remember if Rapid Assault was the first or second one. Don't have the check. It's important to me. Okay, so that's the one that gives you the onslaught. That's the first one. So you're still going to get a bunch. So you're losing 50% onslaught effect, but there's still 130% increase on. Like, you're going from 180% onslaught effect to 130. with those nodes, so it's not as big of a deal. I'm okay with that. That's because it's pretty busted. Oh. Abyss Jewels can no longer roll the modifier that grants a chance to gain Onslaught on kill. This low opportunity cost modifier was a no-brainer, providing strong attack, cast, and movement speed values that devalued all other sources of Onslaught and were too strong for a single jewel modifier. But it can't be used on bosses! Hmm. Okay. Spectral Shield Throw was used almost exclusively with its Threshold Jewel, Divide and Conquer at high levels. Because of this, we've changed the skill to naturally have behavior similar to what Divide and Conquer applied. It will release all projectiles each time it chains, making it far stronger than before with sources of additional projectiles, and comes with a number of chains. While reviewing this skill, we've made changes to all skills that deal damage based on shield defenses, greatly boosting their damage. These skills no longer gain critical strike chance per energy shield, a mechanic that was used very rarely. Instead, the Divide and Conquer Threshold Jewel has been reworked. It is called Seething Fury. Seething Fury provides bonuses to critical strike chance and multiplier to shield charge, spectral shield throw, and shield crush, based on the energy shield from your shield, making this an option for builds that do want to use energy shield based shields with these skills. Okay. These mechanics have all been significantly reduced in power simply because they were too strong. Fire Burst was reduced in damage and has a slightly longer cooldown. Hollow Palm technique now gives 40% more attack speed, down from 60. Ball Ground Slam has had its damage adjusted and changed to having reduced enemy stun threshold to match Ground Slam instead of always stunning. Okay, that's probably fair. Blade Blast has had its area lowered and no longer unnerves on hit, but has had its area multiplier with Blade Vortex increased to compensate. I feel like this is a very cheap way to nerf the Bladefall Blade Blast. I thought the unnerve on hit was a very unique part of the Blade Blast. And I never played the Bladefall Blade Blast, so like, yeah, I've seen it everywhere, so I understand it. But we have changed all existing unarmed unique items and stats specifically to work with melee skills. The upcoming Explosive Concoction was designed to work without any of these items, so Facebreaker's Doriani's Fist, Rigwold's Curse, Hollow Palm Technique, and Martial Artistry have been changed. Alright, buffs to underperforming skills. As well as the aforementioned buffs to almost all skills that use melee weapons, a few bow skills, and cooldown traps, we've made some numerical buffs to a number of skills that weren't measuring up to their counterparts. As usual, we've buffed Firestorm. It now deals 20% more damage at gem level 20, and its first impact now deals 325% more damage, up from 250% more damage, which is cool. Strike frequency of Lightning Spire Trap now scales with increases reduction of trap throwing speed instead of cast speed. Lightning Spire Trap now does 25% more damage at all gem levels. Cool. Seismic Trap now deals 40% more damage at all gem levels. Seismic Trap's small bursts now have a radius 9 up from 7, i.e. 28% more area of effect. Seismic Trap's large burst now have a radius of 18 up from 12, 50% more area of effect. Wave frequency of Seismic Trap now scales with increase in reduction of trap throwing speed instead of cast speed. The rotation speed of Flamethrower Trap no longer scales with increases to cast speed. It can no longer be modified. Yep. Buffs to underperforming skills. Rip Flamethrower Trap. It's probably still powerful, but you could make it stronger before. And this is a nerf. This is a nerf. Shock Nova's ring no longer deals 50% less damage. It now deals full damage, so enemies in the ring take twice as much damage. Okay. So you're pretty much turning Shock Nova into Ice Nova. Lightning. Explosive Arrow now deals 5% more damage with hits and ailments per explosive arrow on the target, up from 3%. Okay, it's a big buff. Artillery Ballista now deals approximately 10% more damage at all gym levels. Cool. Ice Storm, granted by the Whispering Ice unique item, now deals 3 to 5 cold damage per 10 intelligence, up from 2 to 4 cold damage per 10 intelligence. Okay. Body Swap now has a base radius of 14, up from 10, but only 200% more area effect if consuming a corpse. This results in a radius of 42, up from 40. When consuming a corpse, so it's still higher. Okay. Spark now deals more base damage and has reduced growth. This results in it dealing approximately 40% more damage at gem level 1, 10% more damage at gem level 20. I understand. And less beyond that. It deals less damage than it did before at gem level 40, but higher or the same at all other levels. I didn't know if it was possible to get a gym level 40, so. Barrage now deals 47% base attack damage at gym level 1, up from 40%, and 4.6% of base attack damage at gym level 20, up from 47.6. Probably 17% more damage at gym level 1, 15% more damage at gym level 20. Storm Bursts. Base radius now increases faster with levels, resulting in +4 to base radius at gym level 20, up from +2. Okay. Soul Rin's base damage has been increased, and growth has been slightly reduced, resulting in it doing 20% more damage at gym level 1 and 10% more damage at gym level 20. It never deals less damage than it did before, even up to gym level 40. Stormcrawl's growth has been increased, resulting in it dealing approximately 25% more damage at gym level 20 and more at higher levels, but it's still like one of the most awkward skills to use. Lightning Tendril's Strong Pulses now deal 100% more damage with hits and ailments, up from 50%. Okay. Lightning Arrow no longer has any increases to shock effect. As a result, it now has a higher value of shock, as though dealing X% more damage, as the gym level is dealing 290% at gym level 20 with no change at gym level 1. A lightning arrow also now deals 130% base attack damage at gym level 1, up from 110, up to 154%. At gym level 20, up from 134%. This is approximately 18% damage increase at gym level 1 and 14% at gym level 20. Rolling magma damage growth per level has been increased, and it now deals 20% more damage at gym level 20 and more at higher levels. Okay. The amount of cold damage dealt per frenzy charge on discharge has been raised to match fire damage per endurance charge. Okay. This is approximately 22% more cold damage dealt. The minimum amounts of lightning damage dealt per power charge has been slightly increased, and the maximum slightly reduced. This results in the same average damage as the other two elements, but deals approximately 5% less overall lightning damage per power charge. Split arrow has an attack speed of 110% of base, up from 100%, which is cool. Flame Blast now deals 130% more spell damage for each stage, up from 110%. Involved Flame Blast now deals 140% more spell damage, up from 120%. There are plenty of other smaller changes to be found in the patch notes, most of which are self-explanatory. That wraps up this balance manifesto. As you can imagine, there are so many significant changes to the feel of the game as a result of mechanical changes that affect all players, so we'll be keeping a very close eye on feedback. Okay, so they addressed my biggest concern, which was curses. There's ability to invest in curse effect reduction. Hopefully you can craft it on gear. Big thing as well, Avatar of the Veil is 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments while phasing. So it's going to force you into Crystal Skin. Getting all of these nodes will make you 100% ailment immune and give you another maximum resistance. So it's not the worst thing. I mean, there's also, let's see, this is 20% ailment immune avoidance here. So just have to reroute, like, a little bit more investment to get ailment immunity, but it's here. Like I take out those two nodes, these two nodes, and then 3 more on my level 100 Caustic Arrow build to like get it. And then they're nerfing the dot multi stuff. I don't know if they're changing this one as much, because this is like the generic damage over time multipliers. They mentioned that it was Cluster Jewel Pass. We've placed all sources of the stat on non-notable Cluster Jewel passives. Okay. So yeah, there's changes to dot multi on Cluster Jewels. Kind of interesting. That's not a huge make or break thing. And then I'm still really excited about this. The dot multi being a suffix. This makes for better dot builds. So yeah, interesting stuff. That's gonna be it for this. Dash. Rick. The changes to these skills are not huge numerical nerfs. This is the thing I'm most upset about. That, like, This is absurd. To say this is not a huge numerical nerf and then nerfing it in 3 different multiplicative ways is a huge numerical nerf. Ah, good lord. Alright, I'll see you guys tomorrow with, what I'm not going to read through the whole patch notes. I'm just going to go through and highlight the stuff that I thought was interesting. Anyways, that's all for me. I'll see you tomorrow.